Good morning. When our church first started with Relearning Community, Sean was attending the weekends, and he would come home and he would fill me in on what happened. And it kind of went like that for the first 2 years. I was at home with young children, and I just thought it really wasn't something that I had time to do, so he was kind of doing it on behalf of our family. Then Relearning Community did a pastor's retreat for pastors and their spouses, with a focus being on families on mission, really being disciples and sharing the good news with people as an everyday part of our lives. That weekend kick-started for me a real desire to understand how could I incorporate living more intentionally as a disciple of Christ into our lives that were already filled with many activities and routines and responsibilities. I came away realizing that we could be a family on mission in what our family was already doing. We could do this just as we were, meaning most of the times the life of our family was a mess. It was full of chaos. There were temper tantrums from both kids and adults. We were running around. There was a lot of activities going on, but we could do this amidst all that. In fact, our kids have given us some of the best opportunities for connecting with other families. We started by looking at the areas that our family was already involved, where we could intentionally start building relationships, because really that's what we were focusing on, building relationships that would hopefully lead to opportunities to be sharing our faith with other people. So our 10-year-old son Daniel plays hockey, and on average that means we're at the arena 3 days a week. 2 seasons ago it became obvious to us that Daniel would be playing with the same kids year after year, which meant we would be spending time with the same families year after year. We figured this was a good way to begin building relationships, since we're going to be at the arena anyway. So we decided to go all in and began sharing our lives with them, being purposeful about getting to know them and sharing who we were, and introducing them to our family through our interactions with them at the arena. Sometimes that happened with just Sean or with just myself, whichever one of us took Daniel, and sometimes that was when our whole family was along. And sometimes it was harder when the whole family was along. We didn't always look like the put-together family that we wanted to be. When kids are underfoot, they are distracting. Sometimes, or most oftentimes, they're interrupting when you're trying to have conversations. And sometimes they need help relating to other kids as well. So often, all of our imperfections were hanging out for other people to see. But I believe that people don't want relationships with perfect people. They're too hard to measure up to. People want to be with other people who have problems, who make mistakes, and who live in chaos themselves. It frees them up to be the same. So we were basically sharing our lives with them in hopes that they would share their lives with us. For me, it was interacting more with moms than dads, but I would be intentional about bringing an extra coffee along to the practice or the game, offering to carpool with other moms to have an opportunity for conversation, or just purposefully seeking them out one-on-one when we were at the arena. We really don't have much in common outside of hockey with many of these families. Yet in 2 years, our relationships have built to where we're sharing in really meaningful ways with each other. Some of the moms I've connected with have trusted me enough to share some really difficult things. One mom reduced her work hours to be at home more and was carrying a lot of guilt around that decision. Another mom made a pretty significant career change, and it required sacrifice in her family, and she doubted herself for what she was doing. Another family had some recurring health concerns, and one mom shared with me some tension that her and her husband were feeling around how their son was performing on the hockey team. And these are just a few examples. There were many others, but they all came about just because we were sharing together and building relationships over the last couple of years. As a result, I could talk openly with these moms when they shared, most of whom are unchurched, and I would tell them that I was praying for them. I would tell them, I would write notes encouraging them, and sometimes I could be bold enough to write notes telling them where God is in that and how strong God is, and how if they want prayer, they can come and ask. And sometimes in sharing their stories, I could even speak to, well, maybe this is where God is in that. And every time that I was able to do that, they really received it as the blessing that I intended it to be. I got to know one mom who was sharing about some significant work stress, and then in addition, she caught a virus that knocked her out for a couple of weeks. At first, I was just texting her and telling her I was praying, and sometimes I was taking her son along to games when her husband was working nights. But I was driving one night and I just asked God, what else can I do for her? And I really just felt like I needed to help in a practical way. So for the next couple of days, as I cooked for my family, I just cooked double, and then I took some food over to her home. a really neat thing came out of that. She thanked me, of course, but about a week later, after I had done that, I went into the school where both of our kids attend, and I was doing some fundraising. I went into a classroom to collect some forms, and her older son, who's the same age as our oldest, was in that class. And so I know that child from being in the arena, but also from growing up, our boys in school together. And the kids were working in groups, and he was sitting at the very back of the classroom. I quietly went in just to grab some forms from the teacher, and he yelled, I'm not kidding, from across the classroom in front of all of his friends, "Oh, Mrs. East, thank you so much for the delicious meals you made for our family. My mom just loved not having to cook." I was absolutely quite astonished. I blubbered through, "You're very welcome, I really enjoyed it," and kind of left the room. But as I was leaving, I could hear other kids saying to him, "Why did Mrs. East cook for your family?" They knew that our families weren't close families. We weren't families that had done a lot together. And I heard him vaguely saying something about maybe wanting to help out his mom. I don't know for sure what he said. But I trust that God was doing something really great with that. And I was excited about that. From there, then, we started to invite these families from the hockey team into our lives outside of the arena. Group activities with other church friends where they could just be invited along. We did a nature walk in the woods behind our recreation center, a sleigh ride in the winter. We've had a barbecue in our backyard. We're planning a Jays game trip this summer. All of these opportunities are leading to good discussions with our kids about why we're being purposeful in choosing to include these families in our lives. And our kids are starting to get it. From a young age, they're thinking differently about the time they're spending with other kids and with families. In an effort to adopt some of these relearning community principles, our church has changed some of the ways in how we do church. And so one Sunday a month, we don't meet for formal worship on Sunday morning. Rather, we go out together somewhere in the community where we can invite other families into what we're doing, just to spend time together. And that's where some of those things like the nature walk and the sleigh ride came out of. When we first started doing that, we rented a big room at the community center, and we, as families in our church, we just invited other families that we were purposefully connecting to come and join us for an afternoon of snacks and games. That morning, as we were getting ready, we had one of our children who does not enjoy unstructured time with kids he does not know very well. He was very anxious. He was not wanting to come along. He was insisting that Sunday morning was for church, where we go and worship and how we sing and how we do Sunday morning. And we tried to explain to him we were just going to do church in a different way today. He was really having none of it. So we made him come. So we got in the van to go to the rec center. You can imagine the level of stress that was in our van that morning. I was already dreading how this was going to go based on how our family was reacting to it. And we got there, and we went upstairs to the room, and while we were there were some children downstairs who are involved in a gym night that our church runs on Tuesday nights. So one of the families invited some of those kids up to join us for snacks. And while they were there, two of the children really connected with our son. And he spent the entire afternoon inviting them in, having snacks, going out, playing spy, just really interacting with them, boys that he really didn't know very well. And on the drive home, it was really neat, because we could look at him and say, "You totally did church today. We didn't go to a building, and we didn't do it how we normally did. But you did what Jesus is asking of you. You shared of yourself, you demonstrated love to those boys, and you included them in what our family was doing. You did church today." And it was a neat example for him and for us to be able to show our kids what we're and what ultimately we believe that God is asking of them. Just recently, my daughter and I joined a book club with two other mother-daughter pairs. We meet monthly, and after the third meeting, I was talking with another mom about this who's also part of Relearning Community. And as I was talking about it, she got that look that she gets in her face sometimes that says, "I have something really important to tell you." I sometimes cringe when she does that, but she looked at us and she challenged me and said, "Why haven't you invited any other mother-daughter pairs into what you're doing? You're already meeting." It was an activity that they could join along. And so I took that back to the other moms. I kind of challenged them around that. And we have 4 new mother-daughter pairs who are going to join us next month and who are excited about joining us. And we're just going to keep being a book club. There's no pressure to turn it into something more or less than what it is. Plus, we are going to support one another in hopefully moving these relationships to a new level. This hasn't always been easy, and we're not getting it right all the time. We've probably had more failures than we have successes, and there have been some families who do not want to get to know us. And that's okay. They are not our people of peace. We are called to act where God has put us and where we're received from people. And so that's what we've tried to do. It's been only by the strength and courage that we felt from God that we've been able to focus our time and our conversation and our emotional energy into these relationships. but he has been faithful. We're also not doing this alone. Part of why this has been so exciting and we believe so fruitful is we're doing it with others within our church congregation who are also being intentional about being families on mission. We're meeting in huddles, we're regularly sharing meals together as a group, and we're learning from one another's experiences, praying for one another, and ultimately trying to help one another hear clearly from God. All the while we're being very honest and real with each other about who we are. Not having to pretend that I have it all together has been a really important part of this for me. Not just when we're building relationships with new families, but also with the families within our church congregation who are on this journey with us. When we gather together, we come in and out of each other's homes exactly as we are. There is no fuss about cleaning up our houses, there is no elaborate meals, and there's no worrying about whether we are too tired to offer anything on that afternoon. We come in all of our messiness, which is really where the best opportunities for sharing and praying for each other are coming out of. Over the last 2 years, I've seen how this impacts and flows out of people and families in different ways, how we go about doing missions as a family, and then as families together in a group supporting one another. It looks different for each household because each of our lives are very different. This has resonated so deeply with me, and I think it's because I can go out and share God's love with people, share who I am in Christ, without changing who I am or who my family is. Whether we have it all together and look like a finely tuned family, or we look like we're falling to pieces because of the chaos that we have sometimes. We can love people where they are and where we are with them, and just allow God to be God, because really we serve an amazing God, and that's the exciting part.